The thunder of hooves pounded in rhythm with her racing heart as Eliza Thornton clutched the sides of the stagecoach, willing it to move faster across the arid New Mexico landscape. Her body trembled despite the sweltering heat, and the thin cotton of her traveling dress clung to her feverish skin. The world was growing hazy around the edges, shadows creeping into her vision as Oro Grande's small station finally came into view. It was 1878, and the Southern Pacific Railway had yet to reach this dusty corner of the territory. Eliza had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks from Philadelphia, alternating between stage coaches and short stretches of railway lines that seemed to end as abruptly as her former life had. Last stop before Las Cruces, folks, Oro Grande, the driver called out as the coach lurched to a halt. The other passengers, a silver-haired couple and a salesman with a case of patent medicines, gathered their belongings while Eliza struggled to focus. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp of her reticule, the simple task requiring impossible concentration. "Miss, you all right there?" The salesman's voice sounded distant, as though coming from underwater. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she was anything but. The fever had started 3 days prior, a slight warmth she'd attributed to the desert heat. Now it consumed her, her throat parched and her limbs leaden. With trembling hands, she gathered her skirts and stepped down from the coach. The wooden platform of the station swayed beneath her feet like the deck of a ship. Her trunk and valise sat forgotten as the world tilted sideways. "Someone catch that girl." A woman's voice called out, but it was too late. Eliza felt herself falling, the bright New Mexico sky spinning above her as darkness closed in. The last thing she remembered was a pair of strong arms breaking her fall and the scent of leather, horses, and sage. Owen Zachary had not planned to be at the station that afternoon. His business at the general store had been completed hours earlier, but a broken wagon wheel had delayed his departure from town. As he strode across the street toward the blacksmith shop, the arrival of the stagecoach caught his attention. Owen wasn't one to linger around strangers. 5 years in Oro Grande had taught him the value of keeping to himself. His ranch, 20 miles outside of town, provided all the solitude a man could want, solitude he'd sought after the war had taken everything but his life. Yet something made him pause as passengers disembarked from the coach. Perhaps it was the flash of copper hair beneath a modest bonnet, or the way the young woman seemed to waver like a flame in the wind. When she crumpled toward the wooden planks, Owen's body moved of its own accord, crossing the distance in 3 long strides. He caught her just before she hit the ground, one arm around her shoulders, the other beneath her knees. She was light, too light and burning with fever. Her eyes, the color of summer sage, fluttered open briefly before rolling back. "My word, is she dead, Mrs. Peterson?" The shopkeeper's wife hurried over with her hand pressed to her chest. "No, madam, but she's sick as can be." Owen adjusted his hold on the unconscious woman. "Does anyone know her?" The stagecoach driver shook his head. "Boarded in Santa Fe. Said her name was Thornton. Eliza Thornton. Kept to herself the whole journey." "She needs a doctor," Owen said, feeling the heat radiating through her clothes. "Doc Wilson's gone to Las Cruces for the week," the blacksmith called out from across the street. "Won't be back till Monday at least." Owen frowned, looking down at the woman's flushed face. She couldn't have been more than 25, with delicate features and freckles scattered across her nose like stars. Leaving her at the station wasn't an option, and the town's small hotel was hardly the place for someone in her condition. "I'll take her to my ranch," he said, decision made. "My housekeeper knows something about healing. She can tend to her until the doctor returns." Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow. "That hardly seems proper, Mr. Zachary. Would you prefer I leave her here to die of fever, Mrs. Peterson?" His voice was sharper than intended, but the woman's pursed lips softened. "I suppose not. I'll come along to maintain propriety." "No need. Mrs. Flores will be there." Owen nodded toward the woman's luggage. "Someone send her things out once I've got her settled." He carried Eliza to his horse, a tall chestnut gelding that stood patiently by the hitching post. Mounting with an unconscious woman in his arms proved challenging, but years of ranch work had made him strong. Once seated, he cradled her against his chest, her head resting in the crook of his shoulder. "Miss Thornton," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him, "I'm taking you somewhere safe." The ride to his ranch was slow and careful. Every jolt of the horse seemed to pain her, small moans escaping her lips though she never fully woke. Owen found himself speaking softly. Words of reassurance meant more for himself than for her. "Not much farther now. Mrs. Flores will know what to do. She's patched me up more times than I can count." The sun was beginning its descent when the ranch house finally came into view. It wasn't grand, a simple two-story structure of adobe and timber that Owen had built with his own hands, but it was solid and warm, with a view of the mountains that still took his breath away after all these years. "Senor Owen." Mrs. Flores appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her weathered face creased with concern as she took in the woman in his arms. "Que paso? What happened?" She collapsed at the station. "Fever." Owen dismounted carefully, still cradling Eliza. "Doc's away in Las Cruces." Mrs. Flores's dark eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. "Bring her inside. The spare room is ready." The spare room was small but comfortable, rarely used except when the occasional cattle buyer needed a place to stay. Mrs. Flores quickly turned down the quilt and plumped the pillows as Owen gently laid Eliza on the bed. "She needs to get out of these traveling clothes," Mrs. Flores said, already unbuttoning Eliza's high-necked dress. "Go make yourself useful, senor. Bring cool water from the well." Dismissed, Owen retreated to the kitchen, grateful for the older woman's practical nature. Mrs. Flores had come to work for him 3 years ago after her husband died, bringing order to his bachelor existence with a firm hand and a compassionate heart. He returned with water and watched from the doorway as Mrs. Flores bathed Eliza's face and neck with a damp cloth. The young woman's hair had been unpinned and spread across the pillow in waves of copper, her pale face flushed with fever. "Will she be all right?" Owen asked, surprising himself with his concern for a stranger. Mrs. Flores shrugged. "The fever is high, we will see. I have herbs that might help. I'll ride for the doctor tomorrow if she's no better." That would be wise." Mrs. Flores studied him with knowing eyes. "You did a good thing bringing her here." Owen shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, senor, not anyone." She shooed him from the room. "Go now. I will call if she wakes." That night, Owen found sleep elusive. He sat on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead while smoke from his pipe drifted lazily upward. The woman Eliza remained unconscious, her fever neither breaking nor worsening according to Mrs. Flores's reports. Who was she? What brought a well-dressed Eastern woman to a place like Oro Grande alone? The questions circled in his mind like buzzards, though he told himself her story was none of his concern. He had done his Christian duty in helping her. Once she recovered, she would continue on her way, and his life would return to its quiet routine. Yet something about her haunted him, perhaps the vulnerability in her unconscious face or the way she had felt in his arms, as though she belonged there. Ridiculous thoughts for a man who had sworn off such entanglements. Dawn was breaking when Mrs. Flores appeared on the porch, her face grave. "The fever has risen, senor. She is talking but not making sense. I think you must go for the doctor today." Owen nodded, already rising. I'll leave as soon as I've checked the stock. No, Mrs. Flores shook her head firmly. You go now. Miguel can manage the animals. This cannot wait. The urgency in her voice spurred him to action. Within minutes, he was saddled up and heading south toward Las Cruces at a gallop, the rising sun at his back. The journey to Las Cruces normally took the better part of a day, but Owen pushed his horse harder than was wise, arriving by mid-afternoon. Locating Dr. Wilson proved straightforward. The town had only one hotel where visiting professionals typically stayed. Mr. Zachary, the doctor greeted him with surprise. What brings you all this way? There's a woman at my ranch with a dangerous fever. Collapsed at the station yesterday. I need you to come back with me. The doctor frowned, running a hand through his gray-streaked beard. I'm scheduled to see patients here tomorrow. She might not have until tomorrow. Owen's voice was flat. I'll pay double your usual fee. Something in his expression must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, for the doctor sighed and reached for his medical bag. Give me 10 minutes to gather my things. The return journey was slower out of necessity. The doctor was not a young man, and his horse couldn't match the pace Owen had set earlier. Night had fallen by the time they arrived at the ranch, the windows glowing with lamplight. Mrs. Flores met them at the door, her expression relieved. The fever broke an hour ago, but she is very weak. Owen felt a weight lift from his chest. She's awake. For a little while, she asked where she was. I told her she is safe, that you brought her here. Dr. Wilson moved past them toward the spare room. Let me examine her. Owen remained in the kitchen, strangely reluctant to see Eliza now that she was conscious. What would she think of being brought to a stranger's home? Would she be frightened? Angry? He had acted on instinct, but now doubt crept in. After what seemed an eternity, the doctor emerged, closing his bag. The crisis has passed. She's young and otherwise healthy. That saved her. It appears to be influenza, though why it struck so violently is hard to say. Perhaps the strain of travel. Will she recover fully? Owen asked. With proper care, yes. She'll need rest, plenty of fluids, and good food for at least a week. No travel until she's stronger. Owen nodded. She'll have whatever she needs. The doctor gave him a measuring look. She's asking for you, wants to thank the man who rescued her, I expect. Heart suddenly pounding, Owen made his way to the spare room. The door stood ajar, lamplight spilling into the hallway. He knocked softly before entering. Eliza sat propped against pillows, her hair braided neatly over one shoulder, her face pale but no longer flushed with fever. Her eyes, which he now saw were a clear green, turned toward him as he entered. Mr. Zachary, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Flores told me what you did. I'm deeply grateful. Owen removed his hat, feeling suddenly awkward. No need for thanks, Miss Thornton. Anyone would have done the same. A small smile touched her lips. We both know that's not true. You opened your home to a stranger. You rode for hours to bring a doctor. That's extraordinary kindness. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with her gratitude. You needed help. It was the right thing to do. Nevertheless, I'm in your debt. Her eyes drifted closed briefly, exhaustion evident. I should explain why I'm here in Oro Grande. That can wait until you're stronger, he said quickly. The doctor says you need rest. She nodded, clearly fighting to stay awake. At least tell me, how long can I impose on your hospitality? I should make arrangements. You'll stay until you're well, Owen said firmly. No arguments, doctor's orders. A ghost of a smile touched her lips again. You're very commanding, Mr. Zachary. Only when necessary, Miss Thornton. He moved toward the door. Rest now. We'll talk more tomorrow. As he closed the door behind him, Owen was struck by a realization that both surprised and disturbed him. He was in no hurry for Eliza Thornton to leave his home. The following days established a routine. Eliza slept much of the time, her body recovering from the ordeal. When awake, she accepted bowls of Mrs. Flores's chicken soup and cups of willow bark tea with quiet gratitude. Owen found himself checking on her more often than strictly necessary. Bringing wildflowers he claimed Mrs. Flores had gathered and reading aloud from his modest collection of books when she felt strong enough to listen. On the fourth day, Eliza was well enough to sit in a chair by the window, wrapped in a quilt despite the warm afternoon. Owen found her there when he returned from checking the south pasture fences. "You're looking better," he said, pausing in the doorway. She smiled, and something in his chest tightened at the sight. "I feel almost human again. Mrs. Flores says I may try walking to the kitchen tomorrow if I continue to improve. Don't rush it." He leaned against the doorframe. "You've been very ill, I know." She turned her gaze to the window where the mountains rose purple against the horizon. "It's beautiful here, so different from Philadelphia. Is that home for you?" It was. A shadow crossed her face. "Not anymore." Owen hesitated, torn between curiosity and respect for her privacy. "Your luggage arrived yesterday. The station master sent it out with the mail carrier." "Thank you." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "Mr. Zachary, I think I owe you an explanation of why I'm here." "You don't owe me anything, Miss Thornton. Please." Her green eyes met his, earnest and direct. "I want you to understand. You've shown me such kindness you deserve the truth." Owen nodded, moving into the room to sit in the chair opposite hers. "All right, then." Eliza's hands twisted in her lap. "I came west because there was nothing left for me in Philadelphia. My father died last year, leaving substantial debts. Our home, his business, everything had to be sold to satisfy the creditors." "I'm sorry for your loss," Owen said quietly. She acknowledged this with a slight nod. "I worked as a teacher at a ladies' academy for a time, but—" her voice faltered. "There was an incident with the headmistress's son. He made advances that I rejected. When he couldn't persuade me, he became insistent." Owen's jaw tightened, understanding all too well what she wasn't saying. "Did he hurt you?" "No," she said quickly. "Not in the way you're thinking. I managed to fight him off, but in doing so, I struck him with a paperweight. He wasn't badly injured, just a cut on his temple, but his mother refused to believe her precious son could be at fault. I was dismissed without references." "That's unjust," Owen said, anger stirring on her behalf. "It's the way of the world. A woman alone has few defenses against such things." Her voice was matter-of-fact, devoid of self-pity. "With no family, no position, and a damaged reputation, I had few options. Then I saw an advertisement in the newspaper." "What kind of advertisement?" "The schoolmaster in Oro Grande was seeking a wife. He wrote that he needed an educated woman who could assist with teaching and wouldn't mind life in a remote territory." A flush colored her pale cheeks. I was desperate enough to reply. Owen felt a strange disappointment settle in his stomach. "You're to marry Silas Evans." That was the arrangement. We corresponded for several months. He seemed kind in his letters, if rather practical in his approach to marriage. I had few alternatives, so I agreed to come west to meet him. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "I suppose my illness has delayed the introduction." "Evans is a decent man," Owen said, though the words felt forced. "Educated, respected in town." "You don't sound entirely convinced," Eliza observed with surprising perception. Owen chose his words carefully. "He's older than you, must be 50 at least. Never married before. Keeps to himself mostly. I don't know him well." "I see." Eliza's fingers worried at the edge of the quilt. "Well, I'm not in a position to be particular. A marriage of convenience with an older man is better than destitution." The resignation in her voice bothered Owen more than it should have. You could return east. To what? I have nothing there. Her shoulders straightened, a flash of determination in her eyes. I'll make the best of things here. I've always enjoyed teaching, and Oro Grande needs a schoolmistress from what Mr. Evans wrote. Owen nodded, unable to argue with her logic yet strangely unwilling to accept it. Well, you needn't decide anything while you're recovering. You're welcome to stay here as long as needed. You've been more than generous, but I shouldn't impose further. Perhaps when I'm stronger, you could send word to Mr. Evans that I've arrived. Let's see how you feel in a few days. Owen stood, suddenly needing to be elsewhere. Rest now. Mrs. Flores will bring your dinner soon. He left the room before she could respond, troubled by the surprising strength of his reaction to her story. What did it matter to him if Eliza Thornton married Silas Evans? It was a practical arrangement for both parties. Yet the thought of her binding herself to the dour schoolmaster sat like lead in his stomach. That evening, Owen rode into town, telling himself he needed supplies, but knowing his true purpose was to learn more about Evans's intentions. The saloon seemed the likeliest place for information, though Owen rarely frequented it. The Golden Nugget was busy for a weeknight. Miners and cowboys gathered around tables while a piano player hammered out a lively tune. Owen nodded to acquaintances as he made his way to the bar. "Whiskey," he told the bartender, sliding a coin across the scarred wood. Tom Bailey, the town's mayor and owner of the mercantile, spotted him and ambled over. "Zachary, don't often see you in here. What brings you to town?" "Business," Owen said vaguely, sipping his drink. "Heard you took in that woman who collapsed at the station. Eastern lady, wasn't she? How's she faring? Recovering? Should be on her feet in another day or two." Bailey nodded, signaling for his own drink. "Mighty decent of you. Though I expect Silas Evans will be taking her off your hands soon enough. Been waiting for his mail-order bride for weeks now." Owen kept his expression neutral. "That's so? Oh yes. Been fixing up that house of his, even ordered a new bedstead from my store." Bailey winked. "Man his age taking a young wife, some might raise eyebrows, but I say good for him. Been alone too long. Did he mention when he's expecting her? Last stage of the month, I believe, which would be the one that arrived when your patient collapsed." Bailey's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Lord, you don't think Miss Thornton mentioned she came to meet the schoolmaster?" Owen confirmed, watching Bailey's reaction. The mayor whistled low. "Well, that's a piece of bad luck for Silas. Been counting the days he has. Should I let him know she's at your place?" Owen hesitated. "She's still quite weak. Dr. Wilson says no visitors yet." "Ah, well, I'll tell him she's arrived but needs time to recover. He's a patient man, our Silas." Bailey drained his glass. "Though perhaps not when it comes to finally having a woman in his house, if you take my meaning." Owen's grip tightened on his glass, but he kept his voice level. "Miss Thornton needs rest. Evans will have to wait." Something in his tone must have given him away, for Bailey gave him a shrewd look. "Now, Owen, don't go getting attached to Silas's bride. That would cause no end of trouble." "I'm simply concerned for her health," Owen replied stiffly. "Course you are." Bailey didn't look convinced. "Still, might be best to bring her to town soon as she's able. Propriety and all that." Owen finished his whiskey in one swallow and set the glass down with deliberate care. "I should get back to the ranch. Good evening, Tom." The ride home gave Owen too much time to think. Bailey was right, he had no business interfering with Eliza's arrangements, regardless of his personal feelings. She had made her decision before ever meeting him, and it wasn't his place to question it. Yet the thought of her married to Evans, living in that austere house at the edge of town, teaching children by day and sharing the old man's bed by night. Owen's jaw clenched painfully. "Damn it all," he muttered to the night air. 5 years he'd lived contentedly alone, haunted only by wartime memories, wanting nothing more than the solitude of his ranch. How had one copper-haired woman with sage-green eyes appended everything in less than a week? When he arrived home, the house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway. A lamp had been left burning low in the kitchen, and beside it was a plate covered with a cloth Mrs. Flores's thoughtfulness. Owen wasn't hungry, but he sat at the table anyway, mechanically eating cold biscuits and ham while his thoughts churned. Eliza deserved better than a marriage of convenience to a man 3 decades her senior. She deserved someone who would cherish her spirit, admire her courage, protect her with his life if necessary, someone like you. A mocking voice in his head asked. He pushed the thought away. His life was here on this ranch. He had no interest in town life, in socializing, in rebuilding what the war had destroyed. What could he offer a woman like Eliza Thornton? A soft sound in the doorway interrupted his brooding. Eliza stood there in a borrowed nightgown and shawl, her braid hanging over one shoulder, her feet bare on the wooden floor. "Miss Thornton," Owen stood quickly, "you shouldn't be up. I heard you come in." She smiled slightly. "And I'm tired of that room." 4 walls can become quite confining after a few days. "Still, you should be resting." He pulled out a chair. "At least sit down before you fall down." She complied, settling into the chair with visible relief. "Where did you go tonight? Mrs. Flores said you rode into town." Owen hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I went to learn more about Silas Evans." Surprise flickered across her face. "Oh, and what did you discover?" "That he's expecting you, has been preparing his house." Owen kept his voice neutral. "The mayor, Tom Bailey, asked if he should inform Evans of your arrival." "And what did you tell him?" Her expression was unreadable in the lamplight. "That you're still recovering, that the doctor advised no visitors." Owen met her gaze directly. "Was that wrong of me?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I'm grateful for the respite, actually. I need time to prepare myself." Something in her voice made Owen lean forward. "Miss Thornton, Eliza, if you've changed your mind about this arrangement, what alternative do I have?" The question held no self-pity, only pragmatism. "I have no money, no family, nothing to return to. Mr. Evans offers security if nothing else. There are other possibilities." The words escaped before Owen could consider them fully. "Such as?" Her eyes held his, challenging. Owen drew a deep breath. "You could stay here. Work as a tutor for the rancher's children. Several families in the area would welcome proper education for their young ones." Hope flashed briefly in her eyes before caution replaced it. "That's a kind suggestion, but hardly practical. Where would I live? How would I support myself until I established such a position?" "You could stay here," Owen repeated, more firmly this time. "There's room enough. Mrs. Flores would welcome the company, and as for support, consider it an investment. You can repay me once you're established." Eliza studied him, her expression thoughtful. "Why would you do this for me, Mr. Zachary? You hardly know me." It was the question he'd been asking himself since carrying her unconscious form from the station. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "Perhaps I recognize something in you, a determination to survive despite difficult circumstances. Or perhaps—" He trailed off, uncertain how to continue. "Perhaps," she prompted softly. "Perhaps I simply can't bear the thought of you marrying a man you've never met because you believe you have no choice." The words hung between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Eliza's cheeks flushed slightly. "That's very honest. I've never seen much use in being otherwise." Owen ran a hand through his hair, suddenly self-conscious. "Think about it at least. Don't commit yourself to Evans until you've met him, seen what life with him would be like." She nodded slowly. "I will consider it, thank you." She rose carefully from her chair. I should return to bed before Mrs. Flores discovers I'm wandering about and scolds us both. Owen stood as well. Let me help you back to your room. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked slowly down the hallway, her warmth against his side both comforting and unsettling. At her door, she paused. Mr. Zachary Owen, regardless of what I decide, I want you to know how much your kindness has meant to me. Few men would have done what you did. You give me too much credit, he said gruffly. I don't think I do. Her hand squeezed his arm gently before she released it. Good night. Good night, Eliza. As he walked to his own room, Owen felt both lighter and more conflicted than before. He had offered her an alternative, perhaps opened a door that should have remained closed. Whether she would walk through it remained to be seen. The next morning, Owen woke early, as was his habit, and went about his usual chores. The ranch wasn't large by Texas standards, just 500 acres with a modest herd of cattle, but it provided a good living and kept him busy enough to quiet the memories that still haunted him at times. He was mending a section of fence when he spotted a rider approaching from the direction of town. The man's straight-backed posture and dark clothing were unmistakable even at a distance. Silas Evans. Owen drove the last nail into the fence post with more force than necessary, then waited as the schoolmaster rode up. Evans was a tall, spare man with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Not unattractive for his years, but serious to the point of severity. Zachary, Evans greeted him with a nod. Bailey tells me you're harboring my fiancée. Owen bristled at the phrasing but kept his expression neutral. Miss Thornton fell ill at the station. She's recovering at my house under Mrs. Flores's care. I appreciate your assistance, but I've come to take her to town where she belongs. Evans's tone suggested he would brook no argument. A young, unmarried woman has no business staying at a bachelor's ranch, regardless of the circumstances. Dr. Wilson advised against moving her until she's stronger. Owen crossed his arms. The journey to town could set back her recovery. Evans's lips thinned. I find it hard to believe her condition is so fragile that she can't travel 5 miles in a wagon. Unless there's some reason you're reluctant to release her into my care, the accusation hung in the air between them. Owen forced himself to remain calm. Miss Thornton is my guest, not my prisoner. If she wishes to leave with you, I won't stop her, but the decision should be hers. Very well. Evans straightened in his saddle. Take me to her. Owen hesitated, then nodded curtly. Follow me to the house. As they rode, Owen found himself cataloging the differences between them. Evans with his formal black coat and string tie, his polished boots and store-bought saddle. Himself in work-worn denims and a faded shirt, dusty from a morning of ranch work. What would Eliza see when she compared them? Mrs. Flores met them at the door, her expression disapproving as she took in Evans. Senor Owen, I was not expecting visitors. This is Mr. Evans from town. He's come to see Miss Thornton. Owen removed his hat as he stepped inside. Is she awake? She is reading in the parlor. I will tell her. No need, Mrs. Flores. Eliza appeared in the parlor doorway, a book in her hand. She wore one of her own dresses today, a simple blue cotton that emphasized the returning color in her cheeks. Her hair was pinned up, though a few copper tendrils had escaped to frame her face. Her eyes went to Evans, taking in his appearance with careful neutrality. You must be Mr. Evans. I'm Eliza Thornton. I apologize for not meeting you at the station as planned. Evans removed his hat, revealing thinning hair combed carefully over his scalp. Miss Thornton, I'm relieved to see you recovering. His gaze assessed her with a proprietorial air that made Owen's jaw clench. When you didn't arrive on the expected stage, I feared you had changed your mind about our arrangement. No, though I admit the journey was more taxing than anticipated. Eliza's voice was composed, betraying nothing of her thoughts. Mr. Zachary has been most kind during my illness. Yes, well, I've come to take you to town. Evans glanced around the parlor with barely concealed disapproval. My house is ready for your arrival, and the townsfolk are eager to meet the new schoolmistress. Eliza's fingers tightened slightly on her book. That's very considerate, Mr. Evans, but Dr. Wilson advised me to rest for at least another day or two before traveling. Surely a short journey to town wouldn't overtax you. Evans frowned. It seems improper for you to remain here any longer than absolutely necessary. A flash of something irritation perhaps crossed Eliza's face before her expression smoothed. Mrs. Flores has been chaperoning me quite effectively, I assure you, and Mr. Zachary has been a perfect gentleman. Nevertheless, Mr. Evans, she interrupted gently but firmly, I understand your concern, but I must insist on following the doctor's advice. My health has to be my priority at present. Evans looked taken aback at being contradicted, however politely. After a moment, he inclined his head stiffly. Of course, your health is important to me as well. Perhaps I could call again in a few days. That would be fine. Eliza's smile was pleasant but reserved. It will give us a chance to become better acquainted before any decisions are finalized. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Evans's face. I was under the impression that our arrangement was settled, Miss Thornton. We agreed to meet before making any binding commitments, she reminded him. Surely you would prefer a wife who comes to you willingly rather than out of mere necessity. Evans cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with discussing such matters in front of Owen and Mrs. Flores. We can speak of this privately when you're better. For now, may I at least sit with you for a while? I've brought some books I thought might interest you. Eliza hesitated, then nodded. That would be pleasant. Mrs. Flores, perhaps we could have some tea. The housekeeper nodded, her expression carefully neutral. She, señorita, I will bring it to the parlor. Owen, feeling suddenly superfluous, backed toward the door. I should return to my work. Mr. Evans, your horse will be fine at the hitching post. There's water in the trough. Evans barely acknowledged him, already moving toward the parlor with Eliza. Only she glanced back, her eyes meeting Owen's briefly with an expression he couldn't quite read before she turned away. Outside, Owen stood for a moment, breathing deeply of the clean desert air. The schoolmaster's arrival had been inevitable, he had known that. Yet seeing Evans stake his claim on Eliza had affected him more strongly than he'd anticipated. He returned to his fencing work with grim determination, driving nails with enough force to bend several of them. 2 hours later, he spotted Evans riding back toward town, sitting rigid in his saddle as if displeased. Owen finished the section of fence before returning to the house, uncertain what he would find. Eliza was on the porch swing, a shawl around her shoulders despite the warm afternoon. She looked up as he approached, her expression pensive. Your Mr. Evans has gone, Owen said, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. He's not my Mr. Evans, she replied, a touch of sharpness in her voice. And yes, he left some time ago. Owen sat on the porch railing, studying her. You seem troubled. I am. She met his gaze directly. He's exactly as his letters suggested, educated, respectable, established. He spoke at length about the school, the curriculum he's developed, the house he's prepared, all very practical and thorough. But Owen prompted when she fell silent. But I felt nothing when he took my hand. Not a spark, not a flutter, not even simple warmth. She looked down at her fingers, twisting them in her lap. Is it terribly foolish to want more than practicality in a marriage? No. Owen's voice was low. It's human. Yet practicality may be all that's available to me, she sighed, pushing the swing gently with one foot. Mr. Evans made it clear that while he respects my wish to follow the doctor's advice, he expects me to come to town as soon as I'm able. He believes my continued presence here is inappropriate. What do you believe? She considered this, her gaze drifting to the distant mountains. I believe I've been making decisions out of fear for too long. Fear of poverty, fear of scandal, fear of being alone. I accepted Mr. Evans's proposal because it seemed my only option, a safe harbor in a storm. And now, Owen hardly dared to breathe as he waited for her answer. Now I wonder if I'm jumping from one cage into another. She looked at him directly, her eyes clear and determined. I've been thinking about your suggestion, tutoring the rancher's children instead of marrying Mr. Evans. Owen's heart quickened. It's a viable alternative. Would it be? Truly, she leaned forward, earnest. Could I support myself that way? Would families trust their children to a woman who arrived here under such unusual circumstances, who broke a marriage agreement? The families around here care more about results than rumors, Owen said. If you can teach their children to read and cipher, they won't concern themselves with how you came to be here. And what of my reputation? A woman living alone, you could stay here, Owen interrupted, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider them. Not just while recovering, but after. We have the room. Mrs. Flores would welcome another woman in the house. You could use the parlor for lessons, converted to a schoolroom during the day. Eliza's eyes widened. You can't mean that. You barely know me. I know enough. He moved to sit beside her on the swing. I know you're brave enough to travel across the country alone. I know you're principled enough to reject improper advances even at the cost of your position. I know you're kind and thoughtful and stronger than you believe yourself to be. Color rose in her cheeks. You make me sound far more admirable than I am. I disagree. Owen took a deep breath, recognizing that he stood at a crossroads. Eliza, I'm not offering charity. I'm proposing a partnership. You need a place to establish yourself, to build a new life. I need. Well, this ranch has prospered, but it's just a place. It's never been a home, not really. What are you saying exactly? Her voice was hardly more than a whisper. I'm saying that in less than a week, you've brought more life to this house than it's seen in 5 years. I'm saying that the thought of you marrying Evans makes me want to punch something. I'm saying that I care for you, impossible as that seems given how briefly we've known each other. Eliza sat very still, her eyes never leaving his face. Owen, if this is merely gallantry, an attempt to rescue me from a difficult situation, it's not. He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. I've lived alone since the war, never wanted it otherwise. Then you fainted at that station, and somehow nothing's been the same since. A smile touched her lips. That's possibly the least romantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm not a romantic man, Owen admitted. I'm plain-spoken and set in my ways. I spend more time with cattle than people, but I know my own mind, and it's full of you. Eliza's fingers curled around his. What exactly are you proposing, Owen Zachary? Stay. He squeezed her hand gently. Not as my wife, not yet. That would be too soon for both of us. Stay as my guest, as the ranch's teacher. Let us learn each other properly without pressure. And if in time you find you could care for me as I already care for you. And Mr. Evans, our agreement, you promised to meet him, not to marry him regardless of your feelings, Owen pointed out. You've met him now. You said yourself you felt nothing. True. She bit her lip, considering. He would be angry. The town might talk. Let them. Owen's voice hardened. I've never given a damn what people say about me, and I won't start now. The question is whether you can bear it. Eliza was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on their joined hands. When she looked up, determination had replaced uncertainty in her gaze. All my life, I've done what was expected of me. I was a dutiful daughter, a proper teacher, even willing to become a mail-order bride when circumstances demanded it. Her voice strengthened. Perhaps it's time I did something unexpected. Hope surged in Owen's chest. Is that a yes? It's a yes to staying, to teaching, to seeing what might develop between us. Her smile was both shy and resolute. I can't promise more than that right now. It's enough. Owen resisted the urge to pull her into his arms, settling instead for raising her hand to his lips. More than enough. The warmth in her eyes told him he had made the right choice. The following week brought changes to the ranch. Owen cleared the small building that had once served as a bunkhouse when the ranch employed more hands, converting it into a proper schoolroom with benches, a desk, and a blackboard ordered from Bailey's store in town. Eliza regained her strength rapidly once the fever fully broke, taking short walks around the ranch and helping Mrs. Flores with light household tasks. Her trunk contained books and teaching materials she had brought from Philadelphia, anticipating her role as Oro Grande's schoolmistress. I hadn't expected to use these quite so soon, she admitted as she arranged the books on shelves Owen had built in the converted bunkhouse. Or in quite this setting. Having second thoughts, Owen asked, pausing in his work of setting up the benches. No. She smiled, the expression reaching her eyes in a way that made his heart lighten. Just adjusting my expectations. Again. Word of the new school spread quickly among the neighboring ranches. Mrs. Flores's nephew, Miguel, rode to each with Eliza's carefully written announcements, and within days, the first students began to arrive, a mix of ages and abilities, from little ones just learning their letters to teenagers in need of more advanced instruction. Eliza thrived in her role as teacher, her natural authority and genuine warmth making her a favorite with the children. Owen often found himself pausing in his work to watch through the schoolhouse window as she moved among the students, patient and encouraging yet firm when needed. "You're good with them," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, the sunset painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. "I enjoy teaching," she said simply. "Seeing a child grasp a new concept, watching their confidence grow, there's nothing quite like it." The Martinez boy has improved remarkably. His father says he's reading to the younger children at night now. Tomas just needed someone to believe in him. Eliza tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Owen had come to find endearing. So many children do. They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that had become familiar over the weeks of shared meals and quiet evenings. Owen had been careful to maintain proper distance between them, mindful of Eliza's reputation and his promise not to pressure her. Yet each day he found himself more drawn to her, her quick mind, her gentle humor, her quiet strength. "I received a letter from Mr. Evans today," Eliza said suddenly, her voice carefully neutral. Owen tensed. "What did he want?" "To inform me that he considers our arrangement null and void due to my unsuitable living situation and apparent lack of moral fiber." A hint of amusement colored her tone. "He's hired a male teacher from El Paso to take the position he had intended for me. Are you disappointed?" Owen tried to keep his voice even. "No." She turned to face him fully. "I'm relieved, actually. It confirms what I already knew: we would have made each other miserable. He wanted an obedient helpmeet, not a partner." "His loss," Owen said softly. "Perhaps." Her smile held a hint of mischief. "Though I suspect it's more accurate to say it's your complication, given that you're now saddled with a permanent resident and schoolmistress. Hardly a burden." He reached for her hand, a liberty he rarely allowed himself. "Eliza, these past weeks having you here, it's changed everything." Her fingers tightened around his. "For me as well. I came west expecting security through sacrifice. Instead, I found—" She paused, seeming to search for the right words. I found possibility, freedom, joy, and is that enough? Owen held his breath, knowing he was asking for more than her words suggested. Eliza's eyes, clear and direct, met his. I think it could be, with time. Time I have in abundance, he assured her. I'm a patient man, not too patient, I hope. The blush that accompanied her words made his heart race. Owen, I care for you, more than I expected to, more than perhaps is wise, given how recently we met. Owen shifted closer on the swing, his free hand rising to cup her cheek. Wisdom is overrated. Her laugh was soft, breathless. Is it? Completely. And then, because he could resist no longer, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a request rather than a demand. For a heartbeat, Eliza remained still, and Owen feared he had misread the moment. Then her lips softened beneath his, her hand coming up to rest against his chest as she responded with a sweetness that made his heart ache. When they drew apart, her eyes remained closed for a moment, her lashes dark crescents against her cheeks. When she looked at him again, the emotion in her gaze made words unnecessary. I've wanted to do that since you sat up in that bed and thanked me for bringing you here, Owen confessed, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. I've wanted you to since that night in the kitchen when you offered me a choice instead of a rescue. She leaned into his touch. I think I began falling for you then, though I hardly dared admit it to myself. And now I'm certain. Her smile was radiant in the fading light. I love you, Owen Zachary. It defies all logic and timing, but there it is. Joy, pure and uncomplicated, surged through him. I love you too, Eliza Thornton. Have since I carried you home from that station, though I was too stubborn to recognize it immediately. We're quite the pair, aren't we? She laughed softly. A spinster schoolteacher and a solitary rancher finding each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. I prefer to think of it as providence. Owen drew her closer, reveling in the way she fit against him. Though Mrs. Flores claims it was her chicken soup that did the trick. A powerful force indeed, Eliza agreed with mock solemnity before her expression grew serious again. Owen, what happens now, with us? That depends on you. He took both her hands in his. I know what I want, but I promised you time, and I meant it. What if I don't need more time? Her voice was quiet but certain. What if I already know that the ranch, our life here is exactly what I want? Owen's heart hammered against his ribs. Then I'd ask you to marry me. To be my wife, my partner in everything. To make this house a home as you've already begun to do. Then ask me. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. Ask me properly, Owen. He slid from the swing to one knee before her, still holding her hands. Eliza Thornton, will you marry me? Not because you need security or because I need a housekeeper, but because I love you and can't imagine my life without you in it. Yes. The word was both a whisper and a promise. Yes, I will marry you, Owen Zachary. Because I love you, and because with you, I've found not just a home, but myself. He rose and gathered her in his arms, his kiss deeper now, full of promise and passion long held in check. Eliza responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed herself closer. From inside the house came the sound of Mrs. Flores clearing her throat pointedly. They broke apart, laughing, to find the housekeeper watching them from the doorway with barely concealed satisfaction. It is about time, she declared. Now perhaps Senor Owen will stop looking like a sad puppy whenever you leave the room, Senorita. I never, Owen began, indignant, but Eliza's laughter silenced him. Mrs. Flores, we have news, Eliza said, her eyes dancing with happiness. Mr. Zachary and I are engaged to be married. The older woman nodded as if this were merely the confirmation of what she had long known. Bueno, I will make a special dinner to celebrate, and then we must plan the wedding, a proper one in town so everyone can see. As Mrs. Flores bustled back inside, already muttering about menus and arrangements, Owen pulled Eliza close again. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "There will be talk in town. Evans has friends, and your arrival here wasn't exactly conventional. Let them talk." Eliza's chin lifted with the determination he had come to admire. "I know what I want, Owen. I know who I am now. What others think matters far less than what's in my heart." "And what's in your heart, Eliza Thornton?" he asked, though he could see the answer in her eyes. "You," she said simply. "You, and the life we'll build together." In the gathering dusk, with the woman he loved in his arms and the promise of a future brighter than any he had dared to imagine, Owen Zachary felt truly at home for the first time since the war had taken everything but his life. Now life had given him something infinitely precious in return, a love born of chance, nurtured through kindness, and destined to last a lifetime. 3 months later, on a perfect October day, Owen and Eliza were married in Oro Grande's small church. The building overflowed with well-wishers, ranch families, whose children Eliza taught, townspeople who had come to respect the couple despite initial gossip, even a few of Owen's old army companions who had traveled for the occasion. Mrs. Flores had outdone herself with the preparations, transforming the ranch house for the celebration that followed the ceremony. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, lanterns hung from tree branches, and Miguel's cousins provided lively music that had children and adults alike dancing as the sun set behind the mountains. "Mrs. Zachary," Owen murmured as they swayed together to a slow melody, her white dress gleaming in the lantern light. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," Eliza replied, her eyes reflecting the stars that had begun to appear overhead. "Though not as perfect as this day has been." "Even with Evans glowering from the back pew?" Owen asked with a wry smile. "Even then, his presence just highlighted the difference between duty and desire." She rested her head against his chest. "I chose desire, and I've never been happier." Later, when the last guests had departed and they were finally alone in the bedroom that was now theirs to share, Owen took her face between his hands and kissed her with all the love that had grown in his heart since that fateful day at the station. "I never thought I'd find this," he whispered against her lips. "Never thought I deserved it after the war." "We've both been given a second chance," Eliza said softly, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, "and I intend to make the most of every moment." In the years that followed, they did just that. The ranch prospered, expanding as Owen purchased adjacent land and increased his herds. Eliza's school grew as well, eventually moving to a proper building in town once travel became easier with the arrival of the railroad. Their family expanded too, first with twins, a boy and girl born exactly a year after their wedding, then with another son 3 years later. The house, once so quiet and austere, rang with children's laughter and the busy sounds of a happy home. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Eliza to the station where they had first met, now a proper railway depot with daily service to Santa Fe and beyond. "What are we doing here?" she asked, curious, as he led her to the spot where she had collapsed into his arms all those years ago. "Remembering," he said, drawing her close. 10 years ago today, a beautiful woman with copper hair and the courage of a lioness fainted right here, and my life changed forever." Eliza laughed, the sound as musical to him now as it had been the first time he heard it. "Not the most dignified beginning to a love story." "Perhaps not," Owen agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple, "but it's our beginning, and I wouldn't change a moment of it. Nor would I." She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes as clear and direct as they had been that day on the porch when she had first confessed her love. "Thank you for carrying me home that day, Owen Zachary." "Thank you for staying," he replied, his voice rough with emotion, "for making it a home." As they stood together where their journey had begun, the setting sun bathing them in golden light, Owen reflected that some fevers did indeed heal hearts his most of all. What had started as an act of simple kindness had blossomed into a love deeper and more enduring than either of them could have imagined that scorching summer day when fate had brought them together in the most unexpected of ways. And in Oro Grande, for years afterward, people would tell the story of the Eastern lady who fainted at the station and the reclusive rancher who carried her home not just to nurse her back to health, but to heal both their hearts in the process.